It's a Friday edition of Restaurant Expert Roundup. We got two guys from the South, me from Kentucky, this guy from Tennessee. We're going to talk about excellence in your business and in your restaurant. We'll be back in a second. Mr. Jones, what's going on?
Mr. Plapp, how are you doing, sir?
I'm doing better now that I am inside the warmth of our office because I was out on my son's college trip today, visiting where he'll go to college at next year, walking around campus in northern Indiana, I guess middle of Indiana, and it was pretty cold up there.
Yeah, it's that time of year, but what an exciting time for you and your son.
It's going to be fun. Yeah, and we didn't get to have this experience with my daughter. When she was graduating high school, it was COVID, and so her colleges got shifted around a little, and then there was none of that real go visit campus and meet things and get tours. It was just show up, get the hell out of the dorms, and don't look at anybody. So yeah, this one's fun. Got to go up there, hang out with his lacrosse coach, meet the former football coach, which supposedly football's coming back. So we'll see what happens there, and then get a tour of the campus and have fun.
Fantastic.
So I guess introduce everybody on the internet and who's listening to this eventually down the road, who you are, what you do.
Hi, well, I'm David Jones, and I'm the president of the Excellence Advisory. Thank you for that, putting that website up there, Matt. And I work with small and medium-sized businesses to help them achieve their performance dreams. And of course, that includes a lot of restaurants. My background is in actually engineering, but also for 7 years, I worked with PAL's Business Excellence Institute as one of their instructors and consultants. And so a lot of experience with restaurants, love working with restaurants.
Yeah, and some of the guys I know, Bucky Mabe and his team over at Face Entertainment know about you and said nothing but great things. We were down there filming at downtown Flavortown about a month ago, and then 3 or 4 months ago. But great restaurant chain down there. I guess you'd call it a chain. I don't know is it independently owned still?
PAL's, it's still one owner.
Yeah,
and 30 stores, soon to be 31. They're opening another one. So.
Oh, nice. And that's a known brand down there in that Eastern Kentucky and Tennessee, and I guess even over in North Carolina, everybody knows about it there. So talk about excellence in the business. And by the way, you can check out the excellenceadvisory.com. You can also check Mr. Jones out at LinkedIn, linkedin.com/n/David M. Jones. I would imagine there's a lot of David Jones on LinkedIn. It's probably it was probably a hard URL to get the actual David Jones.
Yeah, it was. And I was one of the early ones into LinkedIn. I was lucky to get David M. Jones. There's no chance now. It'd be like David Jones 700 or something on there now. But
that's the good thing about being Matt Plapp is there's not many. I think I've only found one. I found a Matt Plappert. So I've not found any other Matt Plapps. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Growing up with David Jones, I can appreciate that.
So today I wanted to talk about, is your company name, talks about Excellence Advisors, is talking about, excellence in the workplace. I always hate when somebody, I ask them how they're doing. They go, I'm doing good. I'm like, well, good sucks. Let's do great. Because you wake up every day, you have a chance for a new day. But the thing that I've seen in business, and this just came up to me recently, but talking about, culture, the leadership of a company, and then also just the morale and how that leads, or how all that can combine and influence to either have excellence or not have excellence. Recently, a group of our employees were filming our show. They were at 2 different restaurants, like blocks away from each other. And they said, man, Matt, because I'm always talking about positivity. I'm always talking about what you digest is what you consume, you end up becoming. And if you consume negativity and you have negative thoughts and you read negative crap and you listen to the news, it's going to eventually come into you. And if it's in your company, it's going to come out of all the pores and ooze out of your company. And he said, we saw exactly what you preached firsthand. So what do you mean? He goes, we walked in one restaurant and everybody there was pissed off. Everything was wrong with the world. Gas prices, food costs, logistics, employees, the weather, customers. We go a couple blocks away, same exact area, and everybody's loving life. Things are great. And they said, man, it was wild to see the owner's attitude and how he was in the dumps here and this owner was sky high here. The whole company just gravitated with one or the other. And I think that's a huge thing, right?
Absolutely. You know, John Maxwell, who's probably the number one leadership expert in the world today, he says everything rises and falls with leadership. So, and you, I know you've seen this when a leader changes in a restaurant. You
Yeah.
get a new GM, and all of a sudden things change, either for worse or for better. But you can tell something happened, and if you ask, they'll say, "Yeah, we got a new GM," and they certainly do drive the culture. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of leaders don't understand is culture isn't organic. It's not just something that occurs. Culture is based on what the leader will accept.
Okay.
Anything above that line, that's your culture. Anything below that line, you don't tolerate. And so if you let some bad stuff come into your culture, that's what you're going to get. And ultimately, your destiny is determined by the culture you create. So if you create that culture of whiners and complainers and victims, and that's what you're going to end up with. You're going to be mediocre at best. But if you have the other one that your people experience, where the leader is positive and upbeat and bright, that's what's going to be in your future. You're going to have, excellence coming your way.
Yeah. And recently I had something that I had never thought about, but we've been going through some leadership training with our company. We have a consultant that's come in twice in the last month. It's a guy that wrote a book that I read that I really liked. And I like some of the stuff he talked about in there. For me personally, what he calls, and maybe it's out there other places, but the avoid and approach state, that, when you're in a certain place as a person, that you either want to be avoided or you want to be approachable, and how you can stay in the approach state longer. And that's going to help you lead better. But the big thing that I noticed a lot with this leadership training, which he kept talking about, and it clicked with me one time, he said something differently. He's like, when we talk about leadership and leaders, I'm not talking about managers. Like your lowest employee can be a leader, and it's a mindset, and it's a way they approach things. And I think that is something that I had never really kind of thought about. And you look at it in the sports aspect is, there could be everybody on the football team's got to be a leader, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. You have to be a leader. Leadership is influence. And so anybody in any position has influence if they want to exercise it, or they can shrink back and not. It's like that. So that goes back to the hiring and selecting process. Who do you let on your team, right? If you want an A+ team, you got to stock it with A+ players.
Yeah, and I had that this past year. I hired a few people in the past 12 months. It was my fault. I rushed a couple hires, or I didn't look deep enough into a couple things, and I didn't put them against the culture test, I guess you could say. Mm-hmm. And neither one of those people are here anymore. And that was, probably here a couple months too long, about a month too long, but I recognized it. But at the same time, it was because, like you said, you got to have a certain standard that everybody's going to live by, whether it's running fast, whether it's living life a certain way, and it's got to hold up to that. But the one thing you said a minute ago, which I loved, and it's the saying I heard the other day, and a friend of mine said, it's like, what was it? It's not what happens when you're around, it's what happens when you're gone.
Yeah.
As like the owner of a business or the manager, and if people act differently than when you're in the house or you're not, and what you put there, what you accept. I mean, go deeper into that with regards to, I guess, the leadership of a company, on what you said there.
Sure. Yeah. And I'll tell you a quick story that goes along with that. I've got 3 daughters, and they're all grown and gone, but they're like really nice secret shoppers for me. I get stories from them all the time. Guess what I experienced here and there. And one of them was they were in a fast food restaurant, and there was an obvious training situation going on where an assistant manager was training a new hire on drinks. And she said, this is how you measure out the drinks. And she got the scoop, and she said, this is how you measure the ice to go in. She said, except if the manager's not around, then you can just drag the cup through the ice like this, including your knuckles. And the key point there was, all right, it's a safety hazard, but when the manager's not around, we do it this other way.
Yeah.
We cut corners, and she's being trained that way to do it. So it's really crazy. So one of the keys to leadership in establishing that culture that they want is it goes back to, like I said, who you select. So I prefer the term selecting rather than hiring because it has a better ring. Um, but then onboarding them, training them, and being really consistent in the way you coach and reinforce what they're doing. Because when you're not consistent, they're always on the edge. They don't know what's right or what's not right, or what's consistent, what's, am I going to get in trouble for this or
Yeah.
not? So they're always on the edge. And, you got a nervous team. They're focused on you and not focused on serving the customer.
What about in the restaurant space now specifically? You hear it a lot, at least I hear it a lot, is that like some people are afraid to have that line in the sand of what's supposed to happen in the control because the people can go next door and get a job. And I had a guy the other day tell me, he said, Matt, people show up late. People call, they call in the minute before. And if I say you're fired, then I don't have enough staff to run the business and they can just go next door and get a job if I discipline them. I mean, I would imagine that just like anything else, that's avoidable if you hire the right people and you build the right culture, that you're probably your own fault, right?
Yep, absolutely. That's one of those pay me now or pay me later situations. And really what that leader should do is, if that line is crossed, no matter where you draw the line. Now, he can draw the line and say, well, it's okay to be 30 minutes late. If he wants to draw it there, that's fine. But when they're 31 minutes late, that's when you have to hold them accountable.
Yeah.
So he can build in, if he wants to, I wouldn't recommend that, but if he wants to, he can build in that flexibility. But whenever that line is crossed, you have to hold them accountable. And you mentioned it, they don't want to lose people, but what they find is they lose their best people because the A players don't want to be around that stuff.
Yeah.
They want to be around other A players. So they're the ones that are going to leave first. And you're going to be stuck with all these people that come in late and drag their knuckles through the ice and everything else. So you got to be careful who you select. And then, and I could go even deeper into that on your employer brand, because everybody, pretty much promotes their business brand, what they sell, what their menu is. But few really protect their employer brand, which is, what's your reputation as a place to work, not as a place to get food, but as a place to serve food. Yep. What is your reputation? Few organizations, few restaurants really put time and effort into making that happen. But you see the ones that do, they're, like Chick-fil-A, they're hugely successful.
Well, and you can equate that. Like, I think the easiest thing I see that people have easy time correlating things to is sports. And I'm from Northern Kentucky, and right across the river is the Cincinnati Bengals. And for 20 plus years, the Cincinnati Bengals allow bullshit. They allow, a player was in the back of a cop car one time, Pac-Man Jones, and told the cop, I hope you got arrested for your intoxication. I hope you get shot in the line of duty tomorrow. And some of the crap that has happened over the years. And it was funny because I'll never forget, like, this happens all the time there. And it's gotten better the last couple of years. Zach Taylor, the new coach, I think has a little more of a reign on it than Marvin Lewis did for a long time with Mike Brown. But they always had that crap. And what was funny, why I bring that up, is that I'll never forget the one game, the first game of the year. I don't watch them that much, but the first game of the year about 6-7 years ago, the first two plays of the game were offensive penalties on the Bengals. And people are like, oh, it's the Bengals. Like, no, this starts with that thing in the offseason. It's culture. It's acceptance of that crap. Whereas like Bill Belichick and the Patriots, like, you look at him wrong and you're shipped to a different country, you know, and that's what, like you said, it's the word on the street is, oh, you can get away with crap here. Well, if you can get away with that crap, what else can you get away with? Or when they don't look, you dip the cup in there. Well, people understand that. And that is a huge part of your culture of maybe not how you serve your customers, but how your people do.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not everybody out there that's going to be a good fit for your organization. PALS, for instance, realizes that only about 40% of the population is a good cultural fit for the way they run their business. So they set up their hiring and selecting process to sort that out and find those. And they're constantly hiring. There's never a downtime. Hiring is not an event for them. Like, oh, we lost somebody from the dish room, we got to go hire somebody, put the sign out front. No, they're always looking for that next really good person, because there's going to be turnover. It doesn't,
Yep.
You're just going to be keeping status quo or improving your workforce by hiring that next A player. So organizations need to understand, because everybody says, I can't get people, I can't find them, can't keep them.
Yeah.
If you can't keep them, that's on you.
Yeah, look in the mirror.
Yeah, that's on you too, because how many people do you need to run your restaurant? You need 30? You need 40? How big is your town?
Yeah.
50,000?
Yep.
Right? So you need like 1 out of 1,000 people to come work for you. They're out there. They're just maybe working for someone else, or maybe not working at all.
Yeah.
Find them.
And Chad, one of our viewers, and I'm assuming that's the Chad on my team, says culture is huge. And It's something I cultivate here. And ironically, not even meant to do this, but this morning, one of my podcasts I released on my podcast, the audio only one, Restaurant Marketing Secrets, talked about culture. And it hit me last night because I'm sitting here we do a little series called What the Hell Do You Do at ABR, where I kind of impromptu, my little acting, walk in on an employee and go, what do you do here? And so David Slaughter was here last night, and I walked into him, and he knew we were going to be coming to get him, and had some fun with it. But he basically is our marketing director. And he actually, what's weird about the story is he's 22, and I not weird, just funny and cool, is his mom is in his department. He's the marketing director, and she works in the marketing department now as of like 3 or 4 months ago. Okay. He's been with me about 3 years, and which is neat to see a young man at that point, that maturity, and be that much of a rock star. But his mom was attracted to our business because of the culture.
There you go.
And just like what you said there is that I did a podcast not too long ago about hiring. I did one with Jason Pfeiffer, the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine.
Yeah.
And it talked about like, it's not that nobody wants to work. They don't want to work for you. Right. And what I think you hit something there a minute ago, which I don't know if you meant it this way or not, but a lot of businesses are only marketing their food and what they sell.
Right.
And then they're only marketing hiring on hiring boards like Indeed. And if you're looking for people on Indeed, that means you're not attracting people that want to be a part of you. And that's one thing I've never had to do, is I've never had to market jobs on these job boards. We get so many people come to us because they see the stupid stuff we do, which they appreciate. They see the fun we have. And I bet half the marketing for our company isn't about helping restaurants. It's just about us and what we do. And my whole philosophy with restaurants is I call it own their phones. If you can own your customer's attention in their mobile device, you will get their business more often. Well, if you try to own their attention with advertising food, you lost. But if you're doing a podcast about the local high school sports scene with your restaurant, if you're constantly posting content that's fun in your restaurant, you're doing emails and text messages about things that aren't selling food, that's where I believe you develop that advertising on accident for people that want to be involved in your team, and that you're not always struggling to hire people to fill a job.
100%. Absolutely. I don't know if you're familiar with the Savannah Bananas baseball team.
Yeah, I've seen it.
Yeah. So former client of mine, they have, I think, on the order of 5,000. It could be a little low on this. 5,000 people on their waiting list to be hired, right? Everybody understands their culture very clearly. If you know the Savannah Bananas, you know their culture. They have this huge waiting list for people that want to get in.
Yeah, I believe it's in the Marketing Outrageously book. I think John Spolsters talks about the Savannah Bananas in here, if I remember right.
I think you're right.
One of the books I read, I've got seven to eight books I like to read over and over, because I got in this habit of always reading new books. And then a buddy of mine was like, what if the answers, like, did you love that book? It was impactful. Read it again. Why? Have you put in place everything? Did you not forget something? That book was unbelievable. Why not read it 10 times? I'm like, man, it's a good idea. And Marketing Outrageously is one of them. I think I've read probably 4 times now.
Yeah, that's a good one too.
Yeah.
That's a real good one.
So, and ending with excellence, what are a few places, resources that you would recommend restaurant owners, search to find excellence? Books, podcasts, influencers, things that you see as impactful? Because I have a feeling that, and I've seen this, and I have a feeling it's deeper than I realize, that not enough people spend enough time educating themselves with books, with podcasts, with, seminars, with coaching sessions. What are a couple places that people can look at to find excellence, ways to get excellent, I guess you could say?
Yeah, and it's never been easier with what's available to everybody now, with the podcast, anything online. Um, so they should be investing in themselves,
Yeah.
developing themselves. The world is changing at a very fast pace,
Yep.
and as leaders, if we don't keep up, it's going to pass us by. Our systems and processes will be perfectly designed to serve yesterday's customer, not today's or tomorrow's. So you really have to do what you're doing, Matt, and just invest in yourself. Carve out that time, however you do it, while you're on the treadmill, listening to a podcast or whatever it is. So a couple of places I like to go. Number one is Bob Burg. I don't know if you're familiar with Bob.
Yeah. How's Berg spelled?
Burg. And he's the co-author of a book called The Go Giver,
Okay.
and it's about not trying to get from people, but trying to give. It's really a sales book. Then they have a series that has followed in behind it. The Go Giver was the original one, and it's a short book. It's a business fable, really quick read, really impactful. 5 laws of stratospheric success in that. He also has an online community that you can subscribe to, and newsletters and all of that stuff. He's really good. The other one that I like, I'm a budding author. I have a book coming out next year, and John Acuff. I don't know if you're familiar with John.
Yep, I
He's
know
out
that
of
is.
the Nashville area. Funny as can be, good writer, good content. It's not necessarily just focused on business. A lot of it is just like life and being a good person and all that stuff. But it's all relatable because we're all people, and your business is just your people and your processes. So mastering that people side actually is harder than the technical. What recipe do we use? What oven do we buy? That sort of thing.
And something you said there that hit me, that I'll end with as well, is you talked about you've got to update your education, your knowledge bank, your mindset with not 20 years ago's people. It's always updating.
Yeah.
And that kind of comes across me pretty well, because the training that I'm in right now with our leadership training, Jeff, our coach, talked about that in the workforce now, you've got millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, baby boomers, and I can't remember what was before baby boomers, but he had that. And he's like, you've got, like, in the first time in a long time, you got so many people in the workforce, because 30 years ago, somebody that was 75 wasn't really working. Yeah, my dad works 3 days a week in our office. So we've got 20-year-olds here, and we've got 75-year-old here. And not only do you have to adapt the way you treat people and the way you communicate and the way you lead, you also have to adapt your marketing, because I cringe when I hear people talk about advertising and Indeed and all these job boards. And I'm like, that just tells me that you haven't done enough on the front end, because if you were using today's marketing tactics, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, correctly, you wouldn't need a job board, because you would have people like the Savannah Bananas do lining up. Might not have 4,000 or 5,000, but you'd have 40 to 50 wanting to be a part of that team. And I believe it's just because nobody updates their leadership, their education level, and then all that leads into the marketing, and it all ties together.
It really does all tie together. But the ones that do, they're the ones that are super successful right now. Like the Bucky Mapes that you mentioned earlier. Those they know what they're doing, and they're on a fast track to success. If you're at Chick-fil-A or a Pal's and you're generating out of your store 3x what your peers are, what other like restaurants are generating, your life is a whole lot better and easier if you think about it. If you sort of reverse that and say, you mean I can run one store and get the financial returns of 3, but not have to hire 3 times as many people and have 3 times as much rent and sweep 3 times as many floors? And so a lot of people think, and I'll just leave with this, a lot of people think that running a business at excellent levels is harder, but it's not. It is hard, but it's not as hard as running them at mediocre levels.
Okay.
Because the mediocre ones are constantly fighting fires and dealing with the quitting people or the coming in late people, and how, do I hold them accountable or not? And I can tell you a lot of stories, but we can have another conversation just about accountability. It's harder to run a mediocre operation than it is to run a high performing organization. And I hope your listeners take that to heart and actually go start to do something to make their operations a little better. And if you're not sure where to start, give me a call.
Right there.
Glad
ExcellenceAdvisory.com. And you're right. I think the harder thing is to convince yourself that you need to hold these standards and build this standard of how you treat each other, how you do things, your level of excellence. Because a lot of people, when I see them, they say, I'm doing good. And they go, how you doing? I'm doing freaking amazing. And they look at you like, what? And I'm like, hey, it's the only choice, brother. You got no choice. But it's probably harder to accept that. But once you do, watch out, because you start getting a lot better people around you, a lot better customers around you. And it's a lot easier to operate a business that way. So check him out, theexcellenceadvisory.com. Look him up on LinkedIn, David M. Jones. David, appreciate your time today.
Matt, this was great. Let's do it again sometime.
Sounds good. Thanks, sir.
Awesome. Thank you.